Okay, so this is my attempt at a theater history presentation. So, History of Theater by McKenna Kazanowski, that's me. Alright, so we're starting off with ancient Greece. So, the main types of plays in ancient Greece were tragedy, comedy, and satyr plays. And a satyr play, believe it or not, is actually a play that involves a chorus of satyrs, which are half man, half goat people from Greek mythology. Um, so, an important aspect of ancient Greek theater was the chorus. The chorus served a bunch of purposes. It could form a character, narrate events, or it could set an example for the audience. So, the chorus could behave how the playwright wanted the audience to behave and react to the events. So in ancient Greek theater, they used climactic structure. So the plot consists of a series of events leading up to a climax, which is the most exciting point of the play, where all the previous events come to a head and must be dealt with. Okay, so where does our knowledge of Greek theater come from? Well, it comes from the surviving works of these people, which are Aeschylus, Sophocles, Aristophanes, Euripides, and Menander. I'm sorry for butchering the names. Okay, so Roman theater. So they borrowed a lot of aspects of Greek theater, including the climactic structure of plays. The first Roman dramas were actually written by Livius Andronicus, who was from Greece. Roman theater was not all that popular before the Renaissance because they were focused on other types of performances like gladiator matches and chariot racing and mimes, which they found more exciting than theater. Okay, so where does our knowledge of Roman theater come from? They're surviving works of these three playwrights, Plautus, Terence, and Seneca. And these are the only remaining works that we have of ancient Roman theater. Alright, so the Middle Ages. So this was a time of Catholic religious dramas. So it started with liturgical dramas, which were put on in churches to tell biblical stories. They were told in Latin and they were done inside the churches. These grew into cycle plays or mystery plays, which were performed outside of town in the common vernacular, but they continued to reinforce the teachings of the church, so there was still that Catholic message. These used an episodic structure instead of the climactic structure. Okay, so the other kinds of plays going on in the Middle Ages that were not cycle plays were morality plays, which like classic battle between good and evil, and then miracle plays, which were about the lives of the saints. So we still have religious morals and stuff going on. So this period of religious theater was cut off by the Protestant Reformation everywhere except for Spain, which held on pretty strongly. Rulers wanted to prevent religious drama from adding to the conflict between the Protestants and the Catholics, which was pretty intense stuff. So they kind of banned religious theater. Okay, so then we come to the Western Renaissance. So in Spain, we are still doing religious dramas. So the golden age of Spain was 1580 to 1680. During this golden age, playwrights produced a very impressive quantity of works, not necessarily a wonderful quality of works, but there was a lot of quantity. Genres included, I'm not going to say the Spanish names of these words because I can't pronounce them, but they had religious morality plays, and they had comedias, which were secular plays, they had cloak and sword plays, and then they had just little short plays that could be done before comedias, or that could be done in between the acts of the comedias. Okay, so places that were not Spain, they did not have religious dramas anymore because of their potential to add to religious conflict. But this led to Europe's own golden age of theater. So in England, leading up to the English Renaissance, we had this group of educated men, which included Thomas Kyde and Christopher Marlowe. They were called the University Wits, and they combined classical and medieval styles to create a new form of playwriting, which led up to the English Renaissance, which took place during Elizabethan England. So this was the time of William Shakespeare. He was definitely not the only playwright of this time, but you know, he's an important dude. He began writing around 1590. His works included well-developed, complex characters with human qualities. So they weren't just like two-dimensional, stereotypical characters, they were actual people. And he used incredible language that included everything from lofty poetry and blank verse and iambic pentameter to slang and bawdy wit, because he was reaching a wide range of audiences, so he could do that. Can't see my question there at the... Okay, so what was new during this time? The printing press, which helped spread theater to a wider range of people. There was just more ideas were able to spread faster into more people. Okay, so then we have neoclassicism. So writers began to incorporate some of the old Greek and Roman elements of theater into their works. For example, they were writing in 5 acts like the Romans used to do, but it has come to my attention that Shakespeare also did that. Okay, so the big focus in neoclassicism was on believability. So actors should be believable as people in the time period and place that they were set in. So someone of high birth, like a character of high birth, should behave like a character of high birth. Everyone should behave appropriately according to how they are cast. Plays that only take a few hours can't cover like many years. Typically they only cover a few hours, at the most like 24 hours. Plots have to be realistic, and they can't take place in a setting that does not exist. So, gotta be realistic. So we were back to tragedies and comedies being the major genres. Tragedies were written with lofty poetic language, and they followed high-class characters engaged in a struggle of morality to a sad ending, whereas comedies were written in the common vernacular and followed lower and middle-class characters in less weighty struggles toward a happy ending. So in France, neoclassicism wasn't just really a thing people were trying, it was kind of it was really pushed into playwriting by the government. So King Louis XIII created the French Academy, which pushed neoclassicism into the theatrical style of the time. So during this time in England, people were using the neoclassical style. There were also some exciting new elements on stage, such as female actors, and the illusion of the depth in scenery was a new thing that people were able to do. Okay, so melodrama. The end of neoclassicism was also the beginning of romanticism, which focused less on reality and more on the natural world. Or less on reality in the natural world. Romanticists were not as interested in capturing real life on stage as were the neoclassicists. This allowed for the creation of melodrama. So instead of the complex human characters that Shakespeare had going on, melodramas had two-dimensional characters, so there's typically a villain, a hero, and a heroine, and the hero and heroine are victorious and the villain loses. We are back to episodic structure, and we have a happy ending, and music played underneath the action, which is how melodramas got their name, probably. Okay, so what was going on at the time that created the need for melodrama? It was the Industrial Revolution, which came with poor working and living conditions for the working class, and people needed an escape from their bleak lives. So that was what melodrama attempted to create for them. Okay, so then we have realism. This was a reaction against melodrama. So instead of escaping from the harsh realities of life, realists wanted to confront reality. We are back to climactic structure, so we have cause to effect. This led to the structure known as the well-made play, which involves lots of exposition, discoveries, complications, and reversals. Okay, so the scientific method was a big deal during this time. So playwrights were writing about truths that they could observe with their senses in the real world. So I'd say the purpose of theater during this time was to communicate truths, but they were a specific kind of truth. After realism, we have the isms such as symbolism, expressionism, and absurdism. So symbolism dramas emphasize the use of symbols to approximate some semblance of truth. However, audiences were typically confused when they were watching symbolism dramas. Expressionists were reacting against the machine age. They focused on the human spirit. So they too were trying to express truth through their plays, but it was more of a spiritual truth as opposed to like an observable physical truth like the realists. They involved supernatural and magical forces, and they placed great importance on the text. Absurdism arose in France. It was a reaction against the destruction and moral chaos and confusion created by World War II and the Holocaust. Absurdists felt that the world was just a place devoid of meaning and sense and rationalism, and that people had to create their own morals and meaning to existence. So their dramas used a circular or spiraling structure and delved into a topic and explored that instead of telling a story. The characters were vague, and the plot often revolved around them being caught in a chaotic, meaningless, hostile, and absurd world. So I'd say the purpose of theater during absurdism was to create some sort of meaning in a meaningless world. Okay, so then we come to postmodernism, and we have an entirely new kind of play structure. It is a fragmented structure, and postmodern dramas tend to avoid guiding the audience toward one specific message. They want the audience to try and interpret the play and figure out a message for themselves. Postmodern plays can be a reimagining of an old existing text, or original postmodern productions are created sometimes from very little text, like an outline, or from no text at all. So postmodernism leading up to the 21st century involved an avant-garde movement from minorities who had not sufficiently been represented in older theater. So this is a movement from feminist, Latinx, Black, LGBTQ, and disabled communities. There's been a push over the last few decades to make theater more inclusive by diversifying both the real people involved in the making of theater as well as the characters and topics in the plays. So this cause still has a way to go, obviously, especially in big for-profit theaters like Broadway, but incredible progress has been made. And I would say the purpose of theater in postmodernism would be to make the audience think. So there are a couple things that I meant to say back here. So the purpose of theater, of melodramas, was escapism. I think I said that. I think the purpose of theater in neoclassicism was to kind of imitate reality on the stage, since believability was such a big deal. And then I'd say before that the especially in ancient Greek and Roman theater, that the purpose of theater was to entertain. I think Shakespeare tried to make his audiences think, but especially in ancient times, it was to entertain.
The end.